Now, what we're going to have a discussion about today is the whole meaning of what it means. What does a higher power mean? And this, when we look at this idea of a higher power, we kind of wonder, what are we talking about? Are we talking about some kind of external God that is going to help us? Or do we mean something higher? What relevance does it have in terms of being, for me to be able to transform my life? And that's what I want to talk about today. But I want to talk about it from a point of view of my understanding of what a higher power is and why it is absolutely necessary to bring about our change in us as human beings. Now, but because the word is loaded, higher power, it can have religious connotations that aren't helpful. But in AA, for example, a higher power doesn't mean any specific theology. So a higher power, it's just the recognition that for some reason myself as an individual find myself completely helpless and I don't know what to do. So, and it's an extremely important, there's this extremely important understanding that can make all the difference in our life when we understand a higher power in the right manner. So, first of all, when we're talking about our helplessness, you see, when we're caught in the sense of identity that drinking goes along with, we're caught in a feeling of ourselves that's based on our psychology. So what happens is that we have a psychology, it's a built-in content. It contains past experiences. It also contains a very strong, definite idea of what kind of person I am. It contains feelings of fear, anxiety, resentment, and all of this type of thing. So here I am. And the thing is, if you've been drinking a long time, your psychology is of no help really, because basically your psychology, the content of your psychology that's constantly coming active every day is being formed by, in a greater or less extent, by your drinking. So we're caught up with this thing, and here we are, we're enclosed in our sort of alcoholic psychology. And no matter what we do, if we try to resist it, we lose. And if we try to, we give in, we lose. It doesn't really matter. What happens is that ourselves as this psychology stubbornly remains the same. And this psychology determines how we see and how we act. In other words, our mind and our heart is being determined by this psychology. And the problem with an alcoholic psychology is that it's based on fear, like all human psychology normally is based on fear, and all of our resistances to fear. In fact, alcohol is a solution that we have to fear. Now, I had the opportunity to study in India with a guru who was quite remarkable in terms of his understanding of human psychology. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of share my understanding that I gained from this man. So here we are, we're enclosed in ourselves, and we're enclosed in we don't know what to do with ourselves. We're helpless before ourselves. In other words, we're caught in a compulsion to drink as a solution to our life. And this solution happens to be very unfortunate in the sense that it will eventually kill us. It'll remove our friends, our money, our self-respect, everything. It'll just remove, it's a great remover. Now, so when we talk, so there's no kind of higher power in this. This is the domain of helplessness. We are helplessly being what we are like. So there's no help within the confines of ourselves, this personality that's been formed by past conditions. Now, I remember shortly before I gave up alcohol, I remember, sitting down with my bottles and I was just drinking. And my son came to me with a chessboard. He wanted to engage me. He says, "Oh, Dad, would you like to play a game?" And I'm going, "No, I'm too tired." Now, a very interesting thing happened at that moment. A way of seeing arose in me where I saw that I was being completely and utterly self-absorbed and selfish. I was acting ruthlessly. Now, it gave me a shock. Now, it's not so much, you see, when we talk about a higher power, what we're looking at is we know that nature is incredibly intelligent, the way the plants function, the way our bodies function, and all of this sort of stuff. And in Western thinking, there was a Greek by the name of Heraclitus, and they were very, Greek philosopher before Socrates, who kind of was very impressed with the intelligent order of the universe. He gave it the word logos. And later on, what we call the Stoics, they wanted to live in harmony with this logos, and they considered that a very important thing. So what happens is that this logos, or this intelligent movement, can arrive in us as a way of seeing that's entirely new. And so, for example, here I was, what happened was my eyes were opened to an entirely different way of looking at myself. Now, from my alcoholic psychology, my main interest was being right and feeling righteous and feeling, there was no sort of self-criticism. But this light that arose in me as a way of seeing, which some people call wisdom, when this intelligence that's functioning in the universe actually arrives and arises in me as a new way of seeing that shows me clearly and honestly what I'm like. It's quite an amazing phenomenon. And so what happened was, it wasn't like guilt, like in the sense of, oh, how horrible this is. It was a genuine feeling of remorse concerning what I was like. And this remorse basically started to move me in a new direction. Now this is, so not only does wisdom, when wisdom, or the higher power becomes manifest as wisdom in your life, it changes how you see and it changes how you feel. So before this happened, I was feeling very right. Oh, I'm too tired, no problem. I was just simply being myself, as it were. But now what happened was a new way of seeing opened up, where I was seeing differently. And also, not only that, I felt a movement. I felt different in the sense of the direction of my heart. That changed. I thought, this isn't good. This is not good. I shouldn't be like this. And as it turned out, within a month, 2 months, I'd actually given up drinking. That's another story. But what I'm saying here is that there is a higher, in the sense that in my alcoholic psychology, if I try to fix myself from within that psychology, it's extremely difficult. In fact, virtually impossible. Because it's like the Hindus say, it's like you're being a thief dressed up as a policeman to catch yourself. The thing is that when we're caught up in this selfish, egocentric, self-involved, resentful, grandiose, feeling always right type way of being in the world, if we're not emancipated from that, unless there's a shift out of that, there is no light of understanding. So when we talk about a higher power here, I'm not talking about some external God or person talking to me. I'm talking about a very intimate thing, in the sense that what happens is an insight or a way of seeing opens up in me. And it's a moral way of seeing. This is what's interesting, because what I knew was that my actions were wrong. So it clearly showed me that I was living in the wrong way. So I had clarity of perception in terms of my relationship with other people. So in terms of my son, I was being indifferent and neglectful. And so, and with that perception, I found myself being moved differently in my heart. And the whole point is this: unless there's a shift in our minds and in our heart or our emotions, there is no change in us as human beings. And the interesting thing is that this cosmic intelligence, whatever you want to call it, can manifest as a new way of seeing and a new way of feeling that doesn't come from my past experiences and all the things I haven't done and should have done and my resentments and stuff. It doesn't come from fear. It rather comes from life, and it opens up a new life. So when wisdom arises in us as a way of seeing that's entirely new, and you see, when we look at ourselves as a human being, what is it that lifts us out of our trouble? Well, first of all, you see, when we're addicted, we're not living a moral life. We're living a life that is just basically being driven. But one of the things that's really interesting is that as a human being, we have a tendency to hate, to be resentful, to be angry. In other words, we don't look at life through kind eyes. We look at life kind of basically people, we're just sort of waiting for the opportunity to find fault with them or hate them. And we see this every day. And we can always find reasons to hate. But there's something in us that, that when this wisdom arises in us as a new way of seeing, what we find is we're seeing with kind eyes. In other words, we're imbued with goodwill. Or even if we're not imbued with goodwill, like I was with my son, because we have this, because goodwill is in one sense natural to us, when we see ourselves acting in ways that are hateful or resentment, or we're attacking, or we're being unkind, something in us just doesn't like it. So this movement of this cosmic intelligence, as it appears in me, it always is accompanied by a feeling of goodwill. In other words, or acceptance. In other words, we have kind eyes. That doesn't mean to say we're going to like or agree with what is happening, but we're not going to use it as an occasion to become hateful. In other words, we're being moved by goodwill. You could use the word love. The problem with the word love is that, people love soap these days, but what we're moved by, we will find ourselves being accepting. And not only that, this one, because we're full of goodwill, because there's an actual desire for us to relate to other human beings in a helpful, constructive, and warm way, what we find is that when we don't, something in us regrets it. Now, this regret and remorse is a wonderful thing, because it teaches us to correct our behavior. So when we come under the sway, in other words, when we're being governed by what some people call the higher power, we are moved to act differently. So when you're full of goodwill, you naturally are kind and you are naturally accepting. Now, there was a Chinese philosopher by the name of Lao Tzu, and what he talked about, he gave a metaphor like water flowing, very, very natural. It wasn't like, I'm now going to become a good person. It was the fact that when you're governed by this intelligence, that is very intimate with us because it arises in us as new ways of seeing and new ways of feeling. In other words, we can't help, we naturally see this is not good. What I've done is not right. It's harmful. And I will then feel moved to act in helpful and constructive and kind ways in relation to other people. And so if I'm moved that way, what happens is my heart has changed. There's a shift in my heart. Like when I'm being hateful and arrogant, I can't stand that person, and the enjoyment of being resentful and angry, which a lot of people, particularly these days in the political field, it's like it's gone mad. The fact of the matter is that when I become hateful and resentful, I am not at peace with myself. I can't be, because for myself as a person, when I say a person, I make a distinction between myself as a simple conscious person and myself as personality, which has been molded by past events. And the interesting thing is that through wisdom, obtaining of appearing in me as a way of seeing and as a way of feeling, what happens is this changes me. I naturally, now even if I don't really feel like acting in a kind way, I still understand that, okay, I may not feel like acting in a kind way, but I'm going to still talk and act in a kind way. The very fact that I want to do that, the willingness to do that, means I'm being moved by something from above. I'm being governed by whatever you want to call this, the intelligence, the Tao. It doesn't really matter what they call it. But the reality is that because I have this innate ethical striving to relate harmoniously and happily with other human beings, when I violate that, I violate myself. So when we're talking about relying on another higher power, when I'm governed by goodwill, it straightens me out in terms of my relationships with other people. Now, we also have another thing, which is very, very good. Innately in us human beings, when we come alive to it through wisdom, what happens is that we have an innate desire to care for ourselves and other people. And this when we talk about a higher power, a power means it moves us. So what happens is that the desire to care for myself and others is an innate thing. It's not something external operating on me. It arrives. If I see a bus coming towards me and it's dangerous, I go, oh, I better move out of the way. It's a little bit when you realize that alcohol doesn't work and it's destroying your life. And then you have this urge to do something about it. That is because that urge to do something about it, that comes from this innate desire to care. It's concern. And when you're moved by concern or caring, you act caringly. And so what happens is that when that caring is unrestrained, you won't want to drink because you know it's dangerous. You know that it's going to destroy you or other people. But if that caring isn't a strong dynamic within you, you're in big trouble, because you'll be struggling to give up booze, but you're struggling from the wrong place. You're struggling from this struggling person. Now, when I gave up alcohol, I went to see, a long time ago, I was in a Catholic religious order, and my novice master turned out to be the AA chaplain in New Zealand in a program they had. And I went to see him, and he used this expression, let go, let God. Now you think, well, that sounds a little bit, religious and a bit stupid. But when I looked at what happened is that When we struggle and fight with ourselves, our mind isn't clear. So when we're struggling and fighting with ourselves, there's no kind of naturalness. But when you let go, in other words, when you stop the self-struggle, in the absence of that struggle, your mind tends to become clear. And in that clearness, ways of seeing can open up in you. They can help you greatly. This is this is what we call wisdom, isn't it? But not only that, it gives space for this movement of intelligence to move in you as goodwill and concern. And this reliance on higher power, you could say it's a reliance on a very natural process. The natural process that's happening in the universe. Call it nature, call it God. It doesn't really matter the words. But the fact of the matter is that unless you see, unless you become governed by goodwill and concern, your life will be in trouble. Because I've noticed in my life that when I become antagonistic or hateful or attacking, when I fall away from goodwill, to that degree, I become resentful, hateful, and uncaring in terms of other people. When I fall away from caring, I become indifferent and ruthless. So when we're talking about a transformation of ourselves away from a life of alcohol, we have to leave the alcoholic psychology behind. It has to be replaced with something else. And what it's got to be replaced with is a way of being in the world where I am governed by a feeling of goodwill, because that will protect me. It'll guide and direct me not to say harmful and stupid things. It'll guide and direct me to act rightly in relation to other people. And because it's such a core striving to reach out to others and to form harmonious and good relationships, when I do this, I'm coming into harmony with myself, or as Heraclitus would say, the Logos. I'm coming into harmony with the intelligence that seems to govern this world. But so what we're looking at here is that when I protect my goodwill, when I protect it, what happens is it protects me. Because when I'm full of goodwill, I don't feel like being resentful or hateful or finding fault. All of those are manifestations of hate. And the thing is that when we're self-hating, we have a desire to find fault with others, because if we can see them as the bad people, we feel relief of the guilt. Lousy way to act. Doesn't really work. Again, the psychology of a drunk is the psychology of fear and the defenses against that fear. But when we're looking at the psychology of ourselves as a simple conscious person, the psychology of ourselves as a simple conscious person is being directed and governed by goodwill. We find ourselves within ourselves wanting to act rightly, wanting to act in a kind way, finding it an aversion to acting in a way that's cruel or harmful or judgmental or harsh. So this saves me from a tremendous amount of problems, because what happens is, instead of being moved by my fears and resentments and my hatreds and my emptiness, I'm now being moved by something else. I'm being moved by something higher, in the sense of a feeling of goodwill. Also, when I am moved to be caring, then I will find myself wanting to take care of myself and other people. And then when I look at the idea of drinking, I'll go, don't want that, that's no good. But if that care is not active in me as something strong and rigorous, what happens is I won't be moved to move away from alcohol, because I'll be in, you see, if I'm being governed by goodwill and concern, that frees me from the alcohol, actually. But if I'm still within the psychology, the drunken psychology, even though I may not drink, I'm not sober. You see, when we look at sobriety, we're looking at a transformation in our mind, our heart. It's total. But what is this change? Of course, the change is this, is that if I am governed by goodwill, then I will act in the right way in relation to other people. I will come into it. I'll have the basis for harmonious relationships with other people. If I act from caring, if I'm moved by caring, what I'll find is that I'm motivated, I'm moved to take care of myself and take care of other people. And in this way, my life is no longer based on fear, and which is manifesting as all forms of hostility, hatred, resentment, upset, or lack of caring, which is complete negligence. You see, this is the problem with alcohol. It destroys that impulse of caring, so that you just don't care. You're indifferent to yourself and to other people. So this has to be rehabilitated. Now, the cost of not learning to live rightly, which is the cost of not being governed by goodwill and concern or love and care, is enormous. Because when you're not moved by these two factors, you will find yourself just simply reacting, being unaccepting, justifying yourself when you're cruel or unkind. Or you'll find yourself doing stupid things, harmful things, because you're indifferent to what you do. So what actually protects you? And it's an enormous cost. So it's extremely important to learn. So this whole idea of a higher power, you know, when people in AA say, let go, let God, what they're talking about is that when they let go as this selfish struggling, you know, this person who's struggling with themselves to try and fix themselves, who resist, no matter what they do, they find they are powerless. They can't do it. The moment they recognize their helplessness, what happens is all of the mental machinery, all the self-working turns off. And this gives an opportunity for the mind to clear and to come under the movement of this so-called universal intelligence, the Tao, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. But this enables you to live a new life. Nothing else. There's nothing else. So what we're talking about here is not something external to us. We're talking about a transformation that happens in us, where we shift from being governed by our fears and resentments, our hatreds and our cravings, to being moved by goodwill, which straightens that, which is the basis for straightening out our relationships with other people, and caring, which is the basis for intelligent living, in the sense that we intelligently look after ourselves and we look after the people around us. I hope you find that helpful.